Quiet, be still. These are the words I spoke to Father Joshua after he was throwing a fit. He became paralyzed and he couldn't move. Today my homily is going to be a little shorter because, as you can tell, I'm a little sick. Who gets sick in June? Let's just be real. I don't know what's going on. So today's gospel is typically the gospel that priests will preach about Jesus speaking peace to the storms of our life. They talk about the waves and the wind in our life, and Jesus is the one that says, quiet, be still, and he calms the storms. There's some merit to that approach to preaching a homily, but I think it's somewhat misguided because the whole point of the passage is that they are afraid because they don't know who he is. Right? They think that the storm is going to kill them. Lord, do you not care that we're perishing? And he rebukes the wind and the storm and the waves, right, that are filling the boat. And then he says, why are you terrified? Do you not yet have faith? You see, the point of the passage is to show that Jesus is the Lord of heaven and earth. He's the one who has power over the sea and the wind. It is he who's present with them that can save them from the storm itself. In other words, if Jesus is in the boat, they're going to be fine. And there's a similar kind of like analog for our own lives. No matter what is happening in our life, no matter what storm is going on in your life, no matter whether or not it seems like the boat is being filled, Jesus is in the boat. You're going to be okay. And so there's this tension between faith and fear. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that if we are afraid that we don't have faith. It certainly can mean that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. In fact, fear is a natural human emotion in response to a perceived or a real threat. And so there are a lot of things to be afraid of in this world, isn't there? A lot of things to be afraid of with regard to politics, with our culture, what's happening in our families, different sicknesses that might be upon us. And so a natural reaction of fear is understandable. But the key is that what do we do in the midst of that fear? Do we allow that fear to control us? Or more specifically, allow the enemy to manipulate us in it? Or do we focus on where Jesus is in the midst of the fear? What's really, really important is that the world is looking at us as Christians and how we actually respond to trial in our life. Does the world see us kind of freaking out when things don't go well in our life? Does the world see us fear-mongering about all the different things going on? Or does it see in us a peace that cannot be explained? See, we have a choice as to what we focus on. Do we focus on Jesus who's in the boat, or do we focus on the waves and the wind? Because the reality is, the disciples, they missed it. We don't have to miss it. We don't have to miss Jesus' presence. He is the Lord of heaven and earth. He's the risen one, and he's with us in our boat. He who sees Jesus in the midst of the storm sees everything. He who focuses on the waves and the wind misses everything. Jesus never promised that we would live a life without trial or a life without suffering. But he did promise to be with us in all of it. He promised to deliver us not just from it, but also through it. And so today I just want to offer two very brief points. Number one, be very careful about who you allow to influence your emotions of fear. There are people in the church today who are crying out, the sky is falling about the church. They're filled with fear-based thinking, lie-based thinking, which is causing everyone to get all worried as if something bad is going to happen. Meanwhile, there are other people in the church who know exactly where Jesus is, and they're not afraid at all. Right? We, as a church, need to be annoyingly peaceful in the midst of our own trials. The people who don't know Jesus, they need to be annoyed by how much peace we have, right? And the way we get there, though, is not to deny somehow it's not to say that we can't be afraid. It's just, where do we go in our fear? How do we understand the relationship between our faith and our fear? And the key is our fear is an opportunity for faith. It's an opportunity for us to look for him. And it might mean that it seems like Jesus is sleeping in the midst of our storms, and he's not calming them fast enough. Anyone else feel like that at times? I certainly do. But it might mean just focusing on him and who he says he is, and resting in the fact that you know that as long as he's with you, you're going to be okay. One of the things I'm convinced about what happens in the Christian life is that when people don't see Jesus in their boat, when they don't remember that he's with them, what do they do instead? Is they think they're going to die and they jump out of the boat, and then they die. In other words, unbelief is its own self-fulfilling prophecy. If I don't believe Jesus is with me, I'm going to take things upon myself and I'm going to jump and I'm going to get hurt. And then I have the audacity to blame Jesus when the reality he's like, I was here the whole time. My brothers and sisters, what waves and storms are you experiencing right now? I encourage you today, as we were reminded of who he is, he's the Lord of heaven and earth, he's the risen one, to ask Jesus, Jesus, where are you with me? How are you providing for me? How are you loving me? Because if we can keep our eyes fixed on him, on what he's doing for us, it doesn't matter if our boat's filling, it doesn't matter if the wind and the waves are overwhelming, we know we're going to be just fine. Because who is with us is the Lord of heaven and earth, our King and our God. And if we stay faithful to him and focused on him, it doesn't matter what trials we experience on earth, we're going to be just fine.